On January 10th, 2020, the Executive Committee of the MIT Corporation, the Institute's governing board, released the report concerning Jeffrey Epstein's interactions with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The report details the interactions surrounding previously anonymous donations by the convicted serial rapist and human trafficker Jeffrey Epstein to the Media Lab over the course of 15 years, up until 2019. In a brief footnote in the report, a mysterious designed object is introduced in the shape of an orb, a self-completed enigma, without edges or seams, spliced off with scare quotes from the report's closely hewn factuality. It reads, "In late 2017, Professor Oxman arranged to have an orb sent to Jeffrey Epstein from the Media Lab as an expression of thanks. She told us that she did this at Joy Ito's direction. Professor Oxman told us that the request was not unusual and that she was frequently asked by Ito and others to prepare gifts to send to donors. As a gift from a design laboratory to a wealthy donor, this symbolic gesture is fully encrypted, though with a code to what exactly is entirely opaque. What is clear is the bond that it seals in the transfer from the institutional hand to the corporate. Its use symbolic, its material unknown. The orb is a placeholder that conjures a fantasy about the epistemic power of design thinking. This fantasy is instrumentalized through branding for the purpose of attracting capital. The attractive force of branding sustains institutions of design thinking, of which the Media Lab is an archetype, where the production of knowledge and the performance of its production merge. In this mutually enforcing formation, branding attracts investment, and investment propels the design of the brand, and thus the branding of design. The report before us now offers 4 scenarios in which the orb stands in for coinciding relationships between design thinking and its sponsors. These scenarios do not hide their fantasy. They provide a satirical view into the exchanges between the symbolic and the financial. In between these scenarios, we have isolated moments of production and labor, captured in video, that lead to the creation of these fantasy orbs. The algorithmic nature of design thinking, its attachment to standardized and proprietary methodologies, eliminates its capacity to consider the body of the laborer. We treat our bodies as sites where these fantasies are both denied and produced. These performances can be seen in full in the digital exhibition featuring the voice of Chelsea Green.
Orb 1. An orb of aqueous blue acrylic with a radius ratio of 6.371 to 6.378 in 2 opposing axes, its crown imperceptibly squeezed, gestates within a cooling thermoforming mold. Once released, the orb is sliced in half with a laser cutter to prepare it for implantation of another orb, 99.8% smaller than the original. A high-precision diamond stylus engraves the 3 billion letters of the human genome on the outer surface of this inner nested globe. The intervening gap between the inner and outer orbs is vacuum sealed, ensuring complete preservation of the encased surface. The orb is tilted 23.5 degrees off the vertical axis, held by a metal rod, and spun at a gentle rate of 1 rotation every 24 hours, providing even exposure of the subsurface to daylight, human gaze, counting, and projection. Like Noah's Ark, a total catalog is pressed to the surface, observable only with the assistance of a compound microscope. If the fabricator secures commitments from the donor recipient for additional discretionary gifts, progressively smaller nested orbs may be added to the orb. These may be treated as extra storage surfaces for the encoding of useful data, such as social security numbers of staff, operating budgets, passwords, nicknames, and records of workplace harassment incidents. 110 Replogle Splatter 12-inch 30 centimeter diameter world globes desktop model antique illuminated are purchased from Amazon and shipped to the Media Lab at 75 Amherst Street, Cambridge, Massachusetts. Once delivered, the boxes are carefully opened so as to maintain the integrity of each box. The spotter globes are removed and replaced with the orbs. The boxes are then resealed. Each package replica is shipped to a different zip code in the United States, with even geographic distribution, and placed back into a different Amazon locker, with a minor addition to the return label. Attention, Jeff Bezos, as an expression of thanks to the supremacy of convenience over other planetary concerns.
In the next iteration, give yourself a schema to help guide you through the stacks of potential evidence, or try out a few dozen and quickly redo this whole thing. Speed that up, compare and analyze the results, and identify the patterns, the rules. You could do this in just a few hours. Then you won't feel pressure to air all this dirty laundry in front of your audience. I feel some repulsion, frankly.
Orb 2. An orb, measuring 8 inches in diameter, rests on the screen moments before it is oozed out of a glowing nozzle in continuous rings of molten aluminozircon silica, directed by the unflinching signal of CNC code and blown into rigidity by the scream of an attending air compressor. Like the swinging amulet of a hypnotist, the nozzle head traces continuous arcs through the air just above the materializing apparition of the orb. The printing process is captured by a surround of 8 video cameras and projected at a 5-second delay on screens that enclose the printer stage. An assessing faculty, in the form of a computer vision AI bot or a panel of 8 Olympic figure skating judges, reviews the footage for any printing defects. These may include droplets, slips, or any misalignments that produce a break in the orb wall. If the defect in question is determined to threaten the monetary value of the orb in excess of 10% of its estimated ideal value, the printer is halted, the molten umbilical cord cut, and the unfinished orb removed from the bed for immediate pulverization, from dust to dust. In the moment just before closure and annealment, if no critical defects are determined to occur, a vial of collected vapor is released inside, trapping the breath of a dozen lab assistants reciting the value of indices of catastrophe futures at the time of printing. The orb is a prism that absorbs signals of the present and refracts them into specters, perhaps of the future, perhaps of the past. On the day or following day, when the sun is at its northernmost declination, the ideal time for scrying, the video capturing the final perfected print job is transmitted to Michael A. Kaloff, CEO of MetLife, via the cloud as an expression of undying confidence in the power of anticipatory competencies, namely prediction and insurance.
That's the way it works. That's the unspoken contract. You feed us your work, and as we gnaw on it and mash it up to bits, you are relieved of it. That's the agreement. It's why we're here with you. Let us take this from you.
Orb 3. An orb resting atop a plastic chalice is studded with 30 lasers on each of its faceted sides, all connected internally to a central microcontroller. The microcontroller is programmed to guide the lasers through several silent light show sequences. In one of these settings, the lasers are trained on a single point laterally. If pointed at the forehead, the lasers together induce a warming, pulsating sensation that is believed by some lab members to enhance cognition in the neural centers associated with creative thinking. One side of the orb is reserved for a refillable cartridge of artificial fog liquid, which is released as fog during special climactic moments of the laser choreographies. The liquid may be laced with several drops of essential oil to foment, as the frog is released, certain desirable fancies among the assembled audience. Upon completion of assembly and programming, the orb in its chalice is fixed to the top of a white stretch limousine and escorted by a police detail from the location of fabrication to the headquarters of design consultancy IDEO at 780 High Street in Palo Alto, California, 94301. The speed of the caravan does not exceed 20 miles per hour. The limousine pulls up to the front of the office building and stops, idling, while the orb completes its light show sequence. This parade is performed on the first day of every quarter as an expression of good taste and good faith.
I congratulate you on your project. It's brimming with enthusiasm, but largely missing the mark.
Orb 4. An orb with a diameter of 2.5 inches, or just large enough to fit in the average white adult male human palm, is molded of elastomer and injected with a bead gel filling. The elastomer encasing is embossed with the right palm print of the presiding president of MIT. All available audiovisual recordings of former Media Lab director Joy Ito and Media Lab founder Nicholas Negroponte are culled from the Media Lab archives and fed to a generative adversarial network to produce a series of audio recordings in the composite synthetic voice of Ito and Negroponte. The recordings are all loaded into a microprocessor, connected to a micro electroacoustic transducer with a touch activator. This little assembly is then lodged into the gel of the orb such that when squeezed, the orb declares in the voice of Ito or Negroponte, "We are an interdisciplinary research lab working to invent the future of #ethics." 10 instantiations of the orb are produced. Each is placed in a suspension bath of antibacterial liquid held in a watertight, resealable box. One orb is sent to each of the 9 commanders of the major commands of the U.S. Air Force as an expression of shared values. The remaining orb is kept in the office of the director of the Media Lab. At the size of a typical paperweight, the orb is ideal for placement on a desktop or any working surface in a high-stress environment, offering a hand motion for outsourcing guilt and a reassuring grounding reminder to those in need of hope. For a bonus annual contribution, donors may request an adjustment to the audio message. Alternatives include, "We are an interdisciplinary research lab working to invent the future of #corporate governance," or "the future of #killing machines," or "the future of #proxy wars," or "the future of #the orb." Alternatively, donors may donate their voice by sending audio recordings of their speech.
What are your criteria for assessment? Do I want to spill the product? Is the spill the product? Is it a waste of the product? Because you haven't made this clear in your demonstration, you haven't invited us into your process. We're left on the outside trying to scrutinize this opaque entity.